Hello, all two people that might actually watch this video. This is something a little bit different that I don't normally do. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a killer tier list for Dead by Daylight. Normally I just put up like funny clips of myself playing games or my friends and I. But today going to be going through this because I see a lot of people put up a tier list on YouTube or whatever, and you know, giving their opinions on how strong a certain killer is and what reasons they have for thinking that. And I just felt like making one for myself because, I play a lot of killer. I'm hoping to improve with many of these killers, but yeah, just going to give my overall thoughts and hopefully can look back in a couple of months and see where I was right, where I was wrong. Um, Slight disclaimer before I get started here. There are two killers here in this weird array of images that I've never actually played before, and that is Demogorgon and who else? Oh, Pyramid Head. So yeah, I'm gonna be speaking on those two killers based off of other people's gameplay that I've seen on YouTube primarily, and don't take anything I say about that too seriously. So yeah, without further ado, this is a website called Tier Maker. I've seen in a lot of people's tier list. So I'm just gonna get right into it. There's 22 killers, and coming in as, in my opinion, the weakest killer in the game, Wraith. Now, Wraith doesn't really have too much going for him at the moment. He's just an M1 killer, doesn't really have any strong power other than the ability to cloak, and when he does cloak, he's not actually completely invisible, and I know that they're hoping to make him like truly invisible in an upcoming rework, so I'm looking out for that. I think that will really help him. But yeah, there's not too much else to say. He doesn't do anything special other than that. He's very add-on dependent and can be strong with add-ons. I should have probably said this at the beginning, but all of these killers are, viable if you use the right build or the right add-ons and perks and all of that. You can still win games, obviously, but it's just going to be considerably harder than some of the other killers here. And, a close second to the Trapper here, or to the Wraith here, is the Trapper. Just slightly above Wraith because I think if you factor in both of their add-ons and whatnot, like, I end up getting caught by traps a lot more than I do going down to Wraith. And I mean, light burn is still a thing, so you can still fucking burn the Wraith while he's cloaked and give him a little bit extra of a delay before he can uncloak and actually go and hit people. But Trapper, yeah, he could use a little bit of help. He needs basically to have add-ons. He starts off with just the ability to carry one trap. He has to go and pick them up, put them down, and rinse and repeat for every single trap in his base kit. This can be, obviously fixed with some add-ons. But other than that, he doesn't have too much going for him. He can be pretty well countered by people with object or, well-coordinated teams on comms. And yeah, I mean, there's just so much counterplay to Trapper that if you're not terrible like I am, you really won't be dealing with too much of an issue when you go against him. So, into the top 20 we go, and I've got Demogorgon. There's about 3 different pictures here for Demogorgon, but this is another killer. He could be really good. There's definitely ways to play Demo very well, but to me, there's just so many better options for what he does. His M2 attack is basically just a quick dash that takes a few seconds to charge up and is only good for 1 damage state. It's not even like Legion, who at least will put him into deep wound if it hits. So yeah, I mean, it does break pallets, which is nice at loops, but other than that, the M2 is just not that great. I guess it really helps if you're using, like, save the best for last, and you can just use your shred attack to, prevent losing stacks on the obsession. But other than that, he does have a decent map control, to be fair, with his portals. So that's something that, really good Demogorgon players can take advantage of and win games. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I've never played Demo, so For me, he's down here, but who's to say that if I played him a little bit, he couldn't rise up to a higher tier. Rounding off the almost unplayable at a high level category is Clown. I actually think that Clown's half decent with the right build, but once again, he's just kind of limited by his base kit, and I think he's also receiving a rework too, kind of like Wraith, so interested to see how that's going to come, but he did get a rework semi-recently, which was like a little shadow nerf where he doesn't actually slow down when he's like holding his bottles now. So I never played Clown before that rework. I don't particularly know how much of a hindrance that was, but yeah, to me, I actually think the Clown could go up into this next category, but to kind of keep the tiers a little bit more consistent, I've got him down here at the top of this bottom category. He's got pretty good anti-loop, and he's very annoying to play against. So, I mean, top tier survivors can, play well around him. But I don't know. I think he's decent. Moving into the decent but can use some help category, I've gone for Legion, whose picture I cannot seem to find. There it is. At the bottom of this category. Now, Legion, he's pretty decent at getting the entire team injured, but other than that, he's not too great at getting downs. He can use his power for mobility to get around the map a little bit faster than a lot of the other killers, but when he's not in his power, he's a slower killer than many other killers. Standard is 4.6 meters per second. Movement speed, he moves at 4.4. His power just puts people into the deep wound, and he can vault over things, which is cool. But in terms of actually downing people and getting hooks and generating a lot of pressure in that way, he's not so great. A team that plays injured well, maybe a team with 4 dead hards and people who are really good at looping, can really abuse a Legion, because obviously he's going to just be a 4.4 M1 killer at that point. Moving on, I've got the Pig next. Pig is a little random. I think everybody knows that. How you do with Pig is very dependent on how your traps go and whether or not survivors get them off quickly. If you're lucky, Pig can be very strong. If you're unlucky and all of the survivors get their traps off very quick, or if you don't get too many downs very quickly, you can just get gen rushed and basically get destroyed. The Pig's stealth ability, in my opinion, is the worst of the available stealth killers. The crouch takes away the terror radius, but she moves very slow. She's not particularly hard to see, and the little dash attack that she can do when coming out of the crouch is mediocre at best. To be fair, I don't play a lot of Pig, so I know there's a lot of people who really like to play the Pig and enjoy her and think she's one of the more fun killers to play, but for me, it just doesn't do it for me. The power is a little too random, and I don't particularly like that, so I've got her down here, not as low as some of these other killers who, in my opinion, I think I'd rather play Clown and Legion, but that's just me. Moving on up, we've got the Shape, Michael Myers. So Myers is one of those killers that's a little bit outdated at this point. There's other killers that have similar powers and are just, overall a little bit more consistent. Against not too great survivors, he can really do some damage and snowball very quickly. Once he gets into tier 3, obviously with add-ons and everything, he can become a real menace to the entire team. But against really good survivors, it might take a long time to be able to get into tier 3, and at that point it just might be too late. If the survivors spread out really well and do gens, you can get stuck and lose 3 gens before you ever get to tier 3, and by then it might be too late. So I've got him here, and right above him on this tier list, and rounding off this category, is Ghostface for me. I have not played a lot of Ghostface personally, but based off of what I've seen of other players, he's good. Relies a little bit on add-ons, in my opinion, based on the other people that I've watched, to generate his power back faster. and really use what makes him viable. It takes 30 seconds by default. I think with the add-ons you get it down to about 16, and that's pretty good. Um, he stalks people individually, and you can kind of like stalk and go back at other points, and you don't lose any of your stalk progress. And that's pretty nice because obviously you can just kind of hit and run survivors. Um, he also has the ability to crouch, which is handy at some loops. You can do some fun mind games with that. I've tried a little bit myself. I'm not too great at it yet, but yeah, I think his power overall is very similar to Myers, just a little bit better and more consistent. And the fact that he can kind of go completely undetectable at will is a nice bonus. Moving up into the category which I've called strong in the right hands, are killers that I think could be pretty good in, like, obviously, like the title says, the right hands. So at the very bottom of this is the newest killer, the twins. I don't really have too much to say about the twins as of now. I haven't tried out all of the add-ons, but I have played quite a few games with them at this point, and the game is a bit buggy as well, so take everything here with a grain of salt as well. But yeah, it's pretty cool and inventive what they've done with this killer. You know, you can send out Victor and effectively control 2 areas of the map just by clicking a button and switching back and forth. I think while you were able to hit survivors in lockers, Victor was really strong, and obviously now he can just kind of keep the survivors in lockers for 10 seconds while Charlotte comes over to hopefully get them before that 10 seconds has expired. I think overall this killer is really good at slugging and also at camping, which is something that a lot of survivors would find annoying to play against. I don't think that, you know, many survivors going against a strong twins player are going to have a lot of fun. But that's just my opinion. There's obviously a lot of time, you know, that could affect the judgment there. Moving next into probably one of the more controversial placements in this tier list, I've got the Hillbilly in this category, following his most recent rework where they added the overheat mechanic and the annoyingly loud roar that he does right when he's about to actually like go into his chainsaw sprint. I never have played a lot of Billy. I just wasn't very good with him, and I preferred killers like Leatherface, who are kind of similar with the chainsaw, but a little bit easier to use. I played him a little bit more recently since his rework, and I just find it like very annoying to have to worry about your rev meter, because obviously the key thing with Billy is using his chainsaw for mobility. And if you want to use the chainsaw for mobility, you have to keep in mind how much you're using it, because obviously you're also going to want it to one-shot down survivors. And I don't know, he just seems weaker since he can't kind of do that on demand. I think he still takes quite a while to rev up, and his steering is very hard to control. Even with the turning add-ons, you know, you have to practice quite a bit. But that being said, he does control the map very well. He can get from one area to another very quickly, depending on the map, of course, but that is one thing that's really strong about him. And he does have the ability to one-shot down one survivor at a time. So all in all, I think he's actually very strong. You know, a lot of people put him up there in like the top 5 killers in the game. Me personally, I don't really see it that way, especially following the rework. And I also think that the fact that he does that annoying roar right before he goes into his chainsaw sprint can obviously give away that he's releasing his attack. So, you know, that might help survivors with juking. But yeah, obviously, in the right hands, this can be one of the best killers in the game. Moving on up is a killer that I really like to play. That is the Plague. The Plague is quite annoying to go against, depending on, you know, how your team plays. Obviously, if you're playing solo, it can be really hard to coordinate. You know, should we be cleansing right now? Should we play broken for a while? Do we want to risk giving her the corrupt purge? And when you do cleanse, you need to make sure that everyone's cleansing, because obviously you don't want the killer to have her strong ranged attack while everybody else is broken. She does now start with one corrupt fountain at the beginning of the game, which is different from how it was when she was released, and that can obviously be boosted with add-ons to give you, I think, up to 3 corrupted pools at the start of the game for those survivors that don't want to cleanse. Other than that, she's just a very tall, regular mobility killer with an M1 attack, and if you get everybody sick with the Vile Purge, you can basically just go against a team full of no-mithers, and once they start cleansing, in my opinion, this is the strongest range attack in the game. It can hit more than one person with the same attack. It does not give them too much of a head start once they are hit, because the cooldown is very short. You can catch up very quickly. It's hard to use over certain loops, which, I mean, that's just going to be the case with a lot of the ranged attacks for killers. But in my opinion, I think that her Corrupt Purge is the strongest ranged attack in the game, and you basically force the survivors to work well as a team if they want to win. Moving on up, Billy 2.0, in my opinion, is Oni. I think Oni is just Billy, but better. Obviously, you have to get a couple of M1s before you can really start to use his power, but he has insane snowball potential once he does get that power, and I personally think that this is just way better than the Hillbilly's Chainsaw Sprint. You can really bump into walls and stuff, and it will basically not even impact you. You basically just glide right off of them, and you can also just use his power to break pallets, much like you can with any of the chainsaw killers. He gets around the map very quickly with his power. It's a one-shot down. I really just think that, overall, once you do start snowballing, it's very hard to stop Oni. Yeah, don't have too much else to say about that. I am trying to do this video all in one take, so I'm going to move on and talk about the Hag. Honestly, you could really put Hag up higher, but I do think that she belongs in this category as I've laid them out because of the right hands part. The Hag is a really unique killer. She's kind of like the Trapper in that she puts down traps everywhere, but then she can teleport to them and M1. She's a 4.4 killer in terms of speed, but honestly, if you place the traps effectively, you will destroy teams. I've played against certain Hag players that put traps all around at different choke points, and it can really be difficult to get away. With that said, though, there is definitely some counterplay to the Hag, primarily flashlights. Obviously, you can get rid of the Hag's traps by shining the flashlight on them, and it's not very difficult to do. I think it's like 1 second of pointing the flashlight at it. So, yeah, I mean, given the fact that you can disable the Hag's traps very quickly with the flashlights and her low mobility without them, you really do need to know what you're doing to be successful with the Hag. But if you do know what you're doing, you can basically become unstoppable. Rounding off the strong in the right hands category is my absolute favorite killer, the Doctor. I think, in my opinion, I'm the strongest with him. I play him better than I play some of the killers that are going to go up into the basically cheating category, but he does have his limitations. So he's also a 4.6 killer, just an M1 in terms of attacks that do damage. But his real strength is the fact that he has built-in tracking, he has built-in slowdown, and built-in anti-loop with his base kit. So what that means is that when he uses his static blast attack, he'll make the survivors scream and gain a madness tier. The scream will obviously indicate to the Doctor where the survivors are hiding, if they're hiding or if they're running. You'll get a general sense of where they are. The madness, as it builds up with the shock therapy and static blast attacks, will eventually go into tier 3, at which point the survivors are going to have to sit there and snap out of it before they can do any basic action such as unhooking or actually I think you can unhook, but repairing gens, healing, and if you miss skill checks, you'll go ahead and scream and give away your location again. Um, Additionally, skill checks will kind of appear randomly across the screen and sometimes go backwards. So you can really screw up some survivors who aren't used to playing against that. What I think is the strongest thing about the Doctor is the fact that at loops he can really end chases quickly by timing his shock therapy attacks well. Uh, Basically, when you get hit by the shock therapy attack, you cannot vault or throw down pallets for 2.5 seconds. And so when you time this correctly, you basically force the survivors into corners where they can't do anything to get away. If you play him effectively, he's one of the best killers in the game. If you don't really know what you're doing, you can just find yourself getting looped over and over again with a bunch of people screaming. So yeah, moving into the second to top tier, this is where a lot of the strongest killers in the game are going to be listed. I've got at the bottom Huntress. Huntress is one of the faces of the game, along with the Trapper, killers that everybody plays when they're starting out. She's really, honestly, one of the best killers in the game. The killers that I have listed above her, some of them are harder to use, but the reason I've got her this low are some of the limitations. So, number one, I'm not obviously taking into account her super OP iridescent head add-ons with infantry belt, because if that was the case, then she'd go right up here and she'd be the best killer in the game. If you can one-shot people with your hatchets and carry 3 of them. When you don't consider those ridiculous add-ons that are hopefully getting reworked soon, she has a base carry capacity of 5 hatchets. The wind-up time does take a little bit, so you have to time that well when you're running around loops and whatnot. Otherwise, the survivors are going to be able to dodge the hatchets pretty effectively at most loops. With that said, her hatchets in theory will go on forever until they hit something. So I'd say actually, I said earlier that the Plague has the best range attack in the game. This may actually be the best range attack in the game depending on who's playing, because the fact that you can literally hit somebody across the map is really good for gen pressure. Another downside to the Huntress, though, is that she's a 4.4 mobility, and she has a really large humming radius. Her terror radius itself is actually smaller, but you can hear her humming from very far away, which kind of gives away the fact that you're coming, gives survivors the chance to hide, get to a strong tile, and given the fact that she's been out for so long, most of the best survivors in the game know how to loop her very well. Not too much else to say about Huntress. She's very, very strong. I think, obviously in the right hands, she's the best killer in the game. But when you don't consider those add-ons, she's about here. Next up is Leatherface after his most recent rework. I actually think he's become much stronger than Billy. I thought he was stronger than Billy during the time when he had his rework and Billy's wasn't there. I don't actually know if they might have been reworked around the same time. But just based off of my own personal experience, he's very easy to use, and if you know how to time the charges correctly, he is a real handful to deal with. He obviously runs through pallets in the map very quickly, forces survivors to throw them or be one-shotted. Timing your charges effectively will be able to allow you to chainsaw for a long, long period of time and gain speed as you go, easily catching up to survivors and hitting them down in one shot. Additionally, if you want to play a little bit campy as the survivor's being unhooked, you can one-shot down both that survivor and the survivor being unhooked in the same attack, which is pretty strong. Give him the right add-ons and perks, and once again, he's up there with the best killers in the game. Honestly, he's just very strong, and as long as you don't run into stuff, you're pretty much gonna have an easy time. Last but not least, before we round off the top 5, I've got the Deathslinger. Deathslinger, I think, is basically Huntress, but slightly better. His ranged attack doesn't go as far, but it does go a lot faster. And it can be shot through smaller holes. So, for instance, when you're running the shack, you can shoot his like harpoon projectile. Well, that might have ruined my audio recording, but we'll continue anyway. You can shoot his projectile through the smallest holes in lots of different tiles. For instance, the shack or certain jungle gyms where there's little tiny broken parts of the wall. You can shoot through those. It goes very fast, and it inflicts the deep wound status effect if the survivor is fully healthy. All in all, I think he's just kind of, a little bit ahead of her in that regard, and he really does play with certain builds very effectively. He also has a very small terror radius and doesn't have that humming, which, paired with perks such as Monitor and Abuse, will allow him to sneak up and get an early hit and then reel the survivor in for the second hit and down. Yeah, not too much else to say. He's just really hard to counterplay. Basically, if the Deathslinger hits his shots, the survivor can't do too much about it. With the Huntress, there's a lot more you can do to avoid the hatchets and juke. Moving into the top 5, we're still going to be staying in the pretty OP category. I only have 2 in the basically cheating category, which I think everybody knows what they are. We've got Pyramid Head here. And once again, I haven't played Pyramid Head, so I might have him too high, but I know a lot of people think that he has some really strong features that are unique to just him, and I'm going to go into those right now. So, first and foremost, he counters perks such as Borrowed Time and Decisive Strike, which are some of the most popular survivor perks in the game, and basically renders them useless. And that's if he can get the survivors tormented. So when he puts his sword into the ground and leaves the trail, and the survivor does anything but crouch over it, they become tormented, and that effect persists for a long period of time. I do not know exactly how long, but it doesn't go away fast. So once you get a survivor tormented, you really put them in a spot of bother when they go down. When they're on their first hook, you send them to a cage. Once they've been hooked twice, you can do like a quick little Mori thing rather than actually send them to a cage or hook them, which is really efficient in terms of, if it's late in the game and you just need to get that survivor off the map, you can do it very quickly. Survivors who are taken out of the cage do not receive Borrowed Time, and Decisive Strike does not pop. So, if you really don't like going against these perks, that's a really strong strategy, is to get everybody tormented and use the cages effectively. With that said, you can still obviously hook, the first time and then send them to the cage the second time, and hopefully you can get the quick Mori at the end. In addition to that ability, he has a ranged attack which goes through objects that are on the same plane. So if you're on level ground, he can use his ranged attack, which I've heard is somewhat hard to aim, but if you obviously practice enough, I'm sure it's fairly easy to hit at predictable loops and vaults and stuff. So that's pretty strong. It's kind of like Demogorgons, where it does 1 damage state regardless of whether the survivor's healthy or whatever. But it goes through pallets, it goes through walls, it goes under vaults, as long as the killer and the survivor are on the same plane. So yeah, with all of that said, he's just really strong. He moves at 4.6. He does not have tremendous map control like some of the others that I'm about to list above him do. But all in all, like just given all of the things that are unique about him, I've got him in my top 5. Moving on to the second newest killer in the game, that's the Blight. The Blight, in my opinion, has the best mobility of any killer in the game. he gets around the map so fast, and that can only be compounded with some of his add-ons that make him faster or make the rushes take longer. But basically, he can patrol all of the gens on the map in one use of his power if he really wants to. He doesn't do anything too special apart from this mobility. He's an M1 killer. He doesn't have anything that can one-shot uh, apart from a couple of select add-ons. But I just think, given his pressure, he can really control the map. He controls the tempo of the match, and the mobility is really the biggest key factor here. He can get from one end of the map to the next, and now I'm just circling my words, but that mobility is just so key, in my opinion, that you have to have him at the very top. Rounding off the pretty OP category is Freddy Krueger, the Nightmare. Now, Freddy, after his last rework, and I hear he might be being reworked again, received quite a buff, and he has a couple of different powers now. I'll talk about each of them a little bit individually. So for starters, he can place either snares or fake pallets, and nobody who plays Freddy effectively uses the fake pallets. So effectively, what I'm getting at here is he has anti-loop. If you place your snares effectively at loops and the survivor runs over them, they gain like the hindered status effect and they're slower. They'll be forced into slow vaults, or you'll catch up to them quicker because they are actually physically walking slower. So that's up there with Doctor for some of the best anti-loop in the game. I still prefer Doctor, obviously, but that's part of what makes Freddy so strong. What's really strong about Freddy is his ability to teleport to generators, and you can do this several times throughout the game. There's a bit of a cooldown, but if you time it well, you can really punish survivors who are trying to do gens, in combination with perks such as Pop Goes the Weasel, Tinkerer to give you notifications when gens are about to be done. You could be using Ruin and just teleport to a gen to get people off of it. You can fake your teleport to make people get off of the gen preemptively and not actually even teleport. You can be in chase and you can just start teleporting or faking like you're going to teleport and control multiple things at once, the survivor that you're chasing and the survivors that are on gens. And you could even teleport to a gen and come at the survivor that you're chasing from an unsuspecting angle. That's, in my opinion, one of the strongest things he can do in the game. Obviously, if you don't have good knowledge of where the survivors are, or if they spread out really well, this can be a little bit exploited. He is just a 4.6 M1 killer, but he also has a passive ability which goes off different times with different add-ons, but I think it's like 60-second timer just passively in his base kit, and that will put survivors into the dream state, at which point they get the oblivious status effect. So they'll hear this little like singing similar to like the Huntress lullaby, but they won't actually hear the terror radius, so they don't have a great idea of where Freddy is. In addition, this will counter perks such as Borrow Time. When survivors are in the dream state and they go to unhook, because they are oblivious, they won't hear the terror radius, and therefore Borrow Time will not proc. And yeah, I mean, all of this considered makes Freddy one of the strongest killers in the game. He has some pretty oppressive add-ons. He can run several different strong meta builds, and given the totality of his powers, it just makes him one of the strongest killers in the game. Moving on to my basically cheating category, I've got the two strongest killers in the game. First and foremost, second best killer in the game, in my opinion, is the Spirit. The Spirit has a power to go invisible and walk much faster than she can normally walk, which she moves at 4.4 meters per second base speed, but I think her base speed goes from like 110% to 176% of what a running survivor is when she's phasing. Also during that time, survivors don't necessarily know if she's phasing. You can literally mind game with her by standing still. There's no real indication that she's in her power. There was a little bug a while ago that's been fixed where you could actually hear her moaning while she was phasing, and I thought that that was actually a really nice way to give survivors some way to counterplay her. But I mean, people who know how to track well with her don't even need the perks like Strider to uh, understand where the survivors are moving, and they can track them very well and just basically get right up on top of them before they can do anything at all. The strongest thing about her is that she's hard to counterplay. She ends chases quickly, and everybody who's come up against a good spirit knows she is just one of the best killers in the game. Apart from the nurse, who is hands down the best killer in the game. She completely ignores literally everything that survivors can use to run the killer. She does move at the slowest speed, base speed, but she gets 2 blinks in her base kit, which can be either decreased for added base speed, or she could get an extra blink and sacrifice something. I don't know exactly what that add-on does, but the 2 blinks allow her to travel large distances through objects on the map. There's certain buggy areas that she can't actually teleport through, but if you come up against a nurse who knows exactly how to blink on every single map and is familiar enough with her power to time the blinks well, to predict survivor movement and get downs quickly, the game will be over in like literally 2 minutes. It's actually absurd how well certain players can play the nurse. Myself, I'm not very good. I would consider myself harshly mediocre using the nurse, but all in all, I think she's got one of the best powers in the game. It's unmatched, and it's completely different to anything else that's seen here. But yeah, I mean, when the one thing that survivors can do to get away from the killer is completely taken away, you're left with one side that's completely in control, and the other side which is basically just hoping that they can find the hatch. So this is in the end my final tier list. I've thought about this a lot. I could expand out and have more categories, and certain killers I would put like 1 tier up or 1 tier down, maybe if I thought about this at a different time. But this is my list. For, like I said, the 2 people that might watch this video, go ahead and roast me in the comments. Tell me what you would have rearranged here. But for now, hopefully I don't look back at this and think, wow, I was really, really dumb. But yeah, thanks for watching, and as I said, give me your opinions in the comments. Thanks.